Recording has started, so that to me means CNET is ready, right? They're nodding their heads. And so I hereby call this meeting of the Center Region Council of Governments General Forum to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Staff will take a roll call of the members.
Mr. Balachandran, Mr. Barlow,
Here.
Ms. Daring,
Here.
Ms. Engman, Ms. Krishnakudi, Mr. Lipscomb,
Here.
Mr. Marshall,
Here.
Mr. Bernier,
Here.
Mr. Best is not with us, Mr. Fragola,
Here.
Mr. Frank,
Here.
Ms. Strainer,
Here.
Mr. Heller is not with us, Mr. Gracie Griffin, Ms. Stevens,
Here.
Ms. Strickland, Mr. Thompson,
Here.
Mr. Beck, Ms. Hartle, Ms. Hoover,
Here.
Mr. Piper,
Here.
Mr. Cervello,
Here.
Mr. Graham,
Here.
Mr. Hammeister,
Yes.
Mr. Harden,
Here.
Mr. Lord, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Abrams,
Here.
Mr. Magruder,
Here.
Ms. Robb, Mr. Trevino,
Here.
and Ms. Whitman.
Here.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Scott. Next is our public comments. Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard? You have 5 minutes to address us. Hearing or seeing none, we move on to introductions. We have 2 new people to introduce. Who will introduce the new? Rich will.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. On behalf of our newly minted chair, Mr. Dustin Best, and the other members of College Township Council, we would like to welcome back Mr. Anthony Fragola, and he will serve out the balance of the term, unexpired term of Ms. Carla Stilson.
Thank you. Thank you. And our other introduction is from Ferguson Township. Are you?
Mr. Heller, unfortunately, I could not make it today. I was going to say, if you don't mind, Patty, he's just not here, but we do welcome Mr. Heller, Ferguson Township.
Okay, we welcome to our 2 new members of the General Forum. Thank you. One of you already knows what we are like, and the other one will soon learn. Okay, new agenda items. Members may request additional items of business be added to the meeting's agenda. Are there any such items? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Today you are witnessing something new that we are trying out. There are going to be 3 different consent agendas depending on what subset of the municipalities can vote on them. We will start with the consent agenda A, which includes all municipalities. It contains 3 items: the approval of minutes, trick or treat night, and a project budget allocation for the General Forum Room AV service agreement. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move the General Forum approves items CAA1 to CAA3 as listed in the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. The second consent item, Part B, has been asked to be removed from the consent agenda for discussion. But can we do a motion first, and then would someone like to move the motion in the agenda?
What's the motion, Mr. Chair?
It's on page 6. Actually, Half Moon cannot move it.
Well, I just wanted to know what the motion.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Would someone like to move the motion?
So moved.
Is-
Peter Marshall.
Okay, second, moved and seconded, is discussion.
Word gets around.
Well,
So I'm the one who wanted this item pulled from the consent agenda. I'm aware that there are not always electric powered versions of the piece of mowing equipment or other equipment now, as we are gearing up and engineers and so on are producing more electric options. But I wanted it pulled to have a discussion about whether in fact there had been any research, and I actually did find out recently that there's not an electric version of this particular mower. And I also understand that even though there is an electric mower at Millbrook Marsh has the infrastructure to charge that particular mower. And this other mower that is being looked at, there's no infrastructure to charge it other than at Millbrook Marsh, and the transport of this vehicle back and forth would not be practical. So I guess my overarching question is to Parks and Rec, can you wait a little bit, another year or a half a year, whatever? Are there other tractors out there? Can you do a return on investment? And I know I've had these conversations just a minute ago with Christy Owens and had some with Pam Adams. Okay, so I'll leave it with that open-ended question.
Ms. Owens, go ahead and comment, and then I think we should see if there are other questions or comments.
Is this on? Hello, good evening. Christy Owens, Center Region Parks and Rec Director. We actually do not have any infrastructure per se in place for parks to charge electric vehicles and equipment right now. Jim actually charges his equipment at the maintenance facility, so we've been charging most of our smaller pieces of equipment. But I do have in the capital improvement plan in the next 5 years a plan to integrate the infrastructure that we would need to be able to convert to some of these vehicles and pieces of equipment to be electric. So we are still at a stage right now, I think, where we have to move into that, making a determination of the infrastructure and kind of a readiness to see how ready we are to swap out our fleet and whatnot. And I'll let Jim speak a little bit more to the implications of delaying the purchase or the purchase order of this piece of equipment.
So a couple things. I'm Jim Carpenter. I'm Parks Manager with Center Region Parks. A couple things with delaying this. Currently, we are going to be delaying it. There is a manufacturer delay of anywhere from 6 months to 18 months once they receive order. And that's a supply chain issue. So we know we're going to have a delay on this to have anything available. Excuse me. The mower that this is replacing is a 16-year-old mower that we have well over 4,000 hours on that piece of machinery. We have stretched it probably as far as we can without putting some major repairs into the current one we have. We have 2 of these units. One serves as the backup, and wow.
That's emphasizing what you're saying.
I guess. So we do have 2 units, and they mow anywhere up to 20 to 24 of our field sports areas. Most of those sports areas are rectangular fields. Some are the diamond shape for the baseball and softball fields as well. But I just don't feel comfortable delaying this, knowing that we're going to have somewhere between a 6 to 12 month easily wait period on it. And we're okay, we believe that if something goes wrong with the current one we have early in the spring of next year, that we can try to play catch up with just the one machine. But if that one also goes down, then we're going to be in a world of hurt on that. Does that help understand any?
Betsy?
It does, and I knew there was very thoughtful reasoning behind it. I actually was not so thoughtful myself. I meant to delay discussion of this until Pam Adams could join us. She's actually in another meeting until about 7:30. When I talked to her this afternoon, she mentioned that she is part of, I believe it's a consortium of other similarly employed as herself, looking at options for infrastructure, availability and practical, building out possibilities. So I do trust your judgment on this. I think it's important to constantly have these conversations, and I do want to thank Christy Owens for mentioning that specifically in the program. Is it the program plan? You might be saying it wrong. So I know everybody's trying, but this is my job, is just to bring up conversations. Thank you.
Mr. Bernier?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I understand and support the urgency, but since the subject came up, I'm just curious what type of infrastructure is necessary, what type of infrastructure improvement is necessary to have an electric-powered mower? I mean, something obviously besides just a plug, right?
Right. It's going to be your space. We're not set up that we could do this out in the field. We would have to do it in one of the maintenance shops that we have. The only one that we can do it as the one out on Stewart Road. And currently, that's where we would house this piece of equipment. So we can do it, but we're running out of electrical plugs to plug things in on. We are in a rented facility that we have not invested any money in upgrading their electrical system that they have there. So they're on an older electrical system. We're already stretching it probably to the
Okay.
limit.
I mean, this is a member of the Facilities Committee, I was curious. So what we're really talking about is just more regular plugs?
Yeah, because they will produce, when you purchase a piece of equipment, they send you the power pack that goes with it. You plug that into your wall, and then that.
And it's
plugs
just a wall
into- It's a
plug.
converter.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Cervello?
I got a couple questions. With regard to this mower, what is it primarily used for? It's a large area mower,
Correct.
correct?
It's a 10-foot mower.
Gang mowers or whatever, you're mowing a lot of grass, acres of it.
Correct.
Right? Is there an equivalent piece of equipment that is an EV version of this size of a tractor on the market?
The current one coming out that I have seen is a 6-foot mower. This is a 10-foot mower.
Right, but the same size, same capability, same capacity. I mean, size matters because it goes to efficiency.
Correct.
You're mowing large tracts of land on a regular basis, so you get the largest equipment that you can. You have gang mowers for flexibility. You have to have performance when you need it.
That's correct. We do mow those fields twice a week, and unless we get into a summer drought. So that does add into it as well.
Now, in terms of maintenance, the existing piece of equipment, we're talking about a $100,000 piece of equipment,
Correct.
essentially. Maybe a little bit less. I think the model you want to buy is less. So it's a significant expenditure. In terms of the equipment you now have, is it a matter of it being at the end of its useful life and major components are failing? Because you've got decks, you've got things that if you have to replace a large number of them, you can equal the cost of a new unit.
Yes, we have
Is
deck
that-
failures potential deck failures coming up on this piece. And as well as some of the other items that are coming up on this piece that we are noticing is the rear seals are going on it. which is not something we can fix. We've taken to the point where our mechanic that we have would not be able to do this kind of work. We would have to send this out to Pittsburgh, to Griffith, who is the Toro dealer. The rear differential is leaking, and the rear seals, main seals, are leaking. And the decks are to the point, we bring every piece of equipment in every year during the winter, and we go over them with the fine-tooth comb to make sure that we can get them out in the springtime and avoid any kind of major delays or major downtime during the summer months. So that's what my mechanic does. But when we get into this larger stuff that's going to need to be fixed, it's going to have to be outsourced.
Right.
Most likely to the Toro dealer.
Have you gotten pricing on a large, let's say, an extensive repair or refurbishment of the equipment? Do you have some numbers of what that would cost to do a refurbishing
We have
compared
not-
to a new unit?
Correct. We have not sent it out. We just know that 16 years, that's pushing it as far as the number of years on this piece of equipment. Like I said, we've added it about 5 years onto this of use. And part of that was when we picked up the second unit, some of that primary use of that one unit, we were able to share amongst the two units so that they're not constantly being used as much as they were. So we have that little bit of downtime that they're not running 40 hours a week. But as far as sending it out and doing that, we would have to invest the money to send that to Pittsburgh. They would pay us to ship it over there, do a whole valuation on it, excuse me, and give us the pricing on it. But talking to them over there about all this stuff that's going on with it, typical lifespan on these pieces of equipment that they're seeing is between 4,000 and 5,000 hours on these machines. And we're at about 4,300 today on it.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Whitman, oh no, Mr. Abrams and then Ms. Whitman.
Are there any other parks that, in the system that use this type of equipment?
Parks, not here in the region, but yes, throughout the country and throughout the state, yes. And they do use these units at Penn State as well.
Okay, I was just thinking, I was wondering if they're transportable, whether equipment could be shared, but if they're not nearby, then that doesn't make any sense.
Ms. Whitman?
Jim, just to follow up, that I shared with Christy Owens the spec sheet of the parking
Yeah.
lot at Toro.
Brown Master. I just, went on the web and Googled electric mowers. And this particular one has a mowing deck of 60 inches. Is that what you're referring to when you say the width? But
Correct.
you have the one that is in the agenda that you would want is a 6-foot,
It's a 10-foot,
oh, it's a 10.
10-foot mower. The one you gave the spec on is a 60-inch. We typically use those smaller mowers on most of our parks. We use usually 60 to 72-inch decks, so about 6 foot wide. And then these 10-footers are out there to do the large areas.
Oh.
So it's not apples and apples.
Gotcha, okay, I didn't,
Okay.
yeah, I missed that 10-foot. So working on some numbers here, thank you.
Mr. Marshall?
Yeah. First of all, I support purchase of this, but I have a question. Is an electric mower of this size, like a lot of other electric equipment, really takes a long time to get it? Do you have any idea what kind of wait time it would be for an electric mower comparable to that?
There isn't one produced currently at the 10-foot, which is what this mower is. The
So you
small,
can't get it.
not at 10-foot, you can get the smaller ones. And we have one that we are currently using at Millbrook, and I'm looking at one to potentially be used at Whitehall Regional Park when we take over that.
And electric.
Yes. It would be a smaller mower like what you've seen there.
Any other questions or comments from members of the general forum. Any from the public? That said, call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we're now to part C of the consent agenda, which is for the Regional Fire Protection Partners. There are 3 items there. A budget amendment for Borough Fire Station apparatus door replacement, encumbrance for rescue truck replacement. And I think, is that it? Yes. And there's a motion on page 7. Do I hear, would someone like to make that motion?
I'll move that to approve. Yeah, approve a consent agenda C.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, now we're to item 8, which is the classification and compensation study results. Mr. Norenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have been talking about this for quite some time with a number of COG committees, and we have reviewed this with the Executive Committee, the HR Committee, and the Finance Committee recently, and portions of this have been discussed in municipal meetings related to the program plan. We have the consultant from GovHR with us tonight, and we also have staff to share information with you as well. Becca, I don't know if you want to give any introductory remarks before we turn it over to Joellen, or just kick it over to Joellen?
I think you just covered them.
Very good. Okay, I'd like to introduce Joellen Catamatori from GovHR. She's participating with us via Zoom and is going to share a presentation on the study that's been conducted over the past year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. I do have a prepared presentation that I will bring up, and I know you have the report, so when I refer to some of the tables in the report, I will make sure that you know exactly which pages I'm on. So let me pull this up for you. Okay, so initially, I just want to tell you, I think some of you probably have seen this presentation, but for those of you that have not, this study has been going on for some time because there's a lot of parts to it. And working with the COG staff has been very good. You know, your administrative staff as well as the employees have been very helpful. They've been very engaged, and it's very important that everyone is part of the study and has interaction with us in order for us to do our work. So I just wanted to let you know that that has happened, and it was very helpful, and everybody was excellent. So I always like to say that up front because it is a partnership when we do this type of work. But tonight I'm going to talk about several things. I'll go over the scope of work we were asked to perform on behalf of the COG, the job evaluation process, the proposed classification and compensation plan, as well as some of the benefits that we looked at. And the benefits, some of them are standard benefits, as well as some ones that you really don't offer right now, but to think about attracting and retaining employees, we thought we should see what your competition is doing and survey that and make a recommendation there, or make some findings there, I should say. Then we have a proposed compensation plan. I'll talk about that, as well as some general comments about implementation, although the staff is going to talk more about that, but I will give you some general comments. And then how would you manage this going forward? So when you do a class and comp study, it's an investment. You haven't done it in many years, so taking this step and really putting it all together It's easy to maintain going forward, and if you do that, it will last you for a long time, 5, 10 years or more. Especially on the classification side, and the compensation side is easy to maintain as well. But for the classification side, unless the COG grows significantly, you should be able to maintain your plan, which is a good thing. And of course, I will answer any questions that you have. So the work involved classification and compensation. And so when you start a study, we talk with the administration, we find out what your goals are, we see if there's anything we need to address as part of the process. So we had those initial meetings up front, and we had that discussion. We then determined comparable municipalities and COGs to the center region. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, but it was a very involved process. I think what's really special and unique about the center region is that your COG offers a really broad service delivery model as opposed to other COGs in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as well as around the country that I'm aware of. Most of them focus on planning, transportation, things of that nature, but your service delivery model is broader. So it wasn't easy to just go to other COGs and get information about compensation. We really had to look at service delivery models and also look at some municipalities as well. So I'll highlight that for you. We then had some meetings with employees. We asked them to fill out a questionnaire. We had an initial meeting with them and explained the study, what it was, what it wasn't, disseminated information, and asked them to be engaged in part of the study, and they did do that, as I mentioned, which was really terrific. After that, we went through a process to develop a classification plan, and that involved talking with employees, and really learning about the work and how it's performed at COG. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We went through that job evaluation process and really engaged and talked with people about the work they're performing. So that was the first part, talking about the study and working on the classification plan. We then went and did the compensation and benefits analysis. So by going to the comparable municipalities and COGs, we received information and we analyzed all of that, and we made a recommendation on new pay ranges for you. And then we also looked at the benefits, and there's a narrative in the report about how you compare to some of the other organizations. And so what you have in front of you is the report. We're presenting it. We have presented it several times. We're soliciting your feedback, working with the staff, and then if we have to make any updates to the report, we can, and then we can finalize the study. So job evaluation, that was the first part, and we looked at 88 positions at COG. And again, this has not been done for, I believe it's 17 years, going on 18 years. So it was a comprehensive process. And on the job evaluation side, we asked employees to fill out a questionnaire, and we asked them to give us some feedback about all of the job factors that relate to the work that they perform. So you can see here, there's 9 different factors listed, starting with education and experience needed to perform the work, decision-making, which gets to the complexity of the work, policy development, which gets into the overall administration of COG, and other items, supervision, the work environment, which correlates with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we had all of the employees look at their job descriptions, tell us if they needed any updates, and then answer questions as it related to all of these 9 factors. And every position that was in the study had a response to every single one of these 9 factors. So going through job evaluation, we had to talk with the employees because you could be in a planning position, say at the COG or in HR or in fire, and you have your job, and you could go to another jurisdiction. You could have similar duties, but the nuances of the job could be a little bit different. So by having the employees fill out the questionnaire, by interviewing them, we really can learn about those nuances, and then we can classify them as they relate to the work that's performed at COG. And what that does is it establishes what we call internal equity, because it compares the positions at COG against each other. And internal equity is important because when you have a few jobs that have a similar value, they end up in the same grade, same pay grade, and then the compensation range that goes along with that grade is recommended for all of the positions within that grade. So that's what internal equity is, and that actually equals pay equity. So in Pennsylvania, if you ever have a law that talks about pay equity, this system will comply with that because of the fact that your classification plan is based on internal equity and it relates to your organization. So we developed a classification plan, which is the list of positions assigned to different grades. It's on table 1, which is on page 26 of the printed version of the report and 29 of the PDF. So depending on what you're looking at, that table is the classification plan. It has the position title, it has any recommended title changes, it has a JFA score, which is the score of that questionnaire that I was talking about, an ill range, which is the range of points assigned to each grade. So in the future, if you fill out the questionnaire and you score it, and COG has the tool to do that in the future if you decide to classify a job, the range of points, wherever it scores, you know exactly which grade it will fall into in the future. So we did recommend some title changes as well as part of the study, but that was the work that went into the development of the classification plan. The next thing we did was the compensation and benefits survey. And you can see here, and in Appendix B of the report, this analysis is there. We looked at some criteria in Pennsylvania. So you can see we have population, full-time employees, and proximity, but the other factors here are financial factors. And the reason why that's important is because if we're going to make a recommendation to you on ranges, salary ranges for the different positions of the different grades within the classification plan, we want it to be based on ability to pay. So we looked in Pennsylvania, we went through this analysis for the communities in Pennsylvania, and we came up with a list. And so this list, this is half of the list. It's very long. Any position in Pennsylvania, we determined comparability, and we used State College as your community because COG, that's the largest community in the center region. So we looked at State College's information as it related to that criteria, and then we compared all of the communities in Pennsylvania to State College to determine comparability. What was interesting about determining comps was we went through, we created an initial list, and we worked very closely with the staff and the agency directors on this because you are unique. You have a very robust service delivery model, and you have Penn State in your region. So one of the things that was important was to also look at other university towns. So we went through, we created a list, we looked at service delivery models as well to see if those other communities were somewhat comparable to what you're doing at COG, and we sent out a survey. We started to get information and we realized that it was short in some areas. So you can see in the first part of the list here, Altoona, for example, the word library is behind it. We determined that we should go to Altoona for information on the library. Chambersburg, we went there for fire information. You can also see if there's a community here, so Derry Township has the COG. We determined that COG was comparable to the center region. So we qualified this list, here's the other part of it, based on our analysis on that criteria, as well as communities that we looked at for specific information because we needed to supplement what we were receiving from the market. So it's a pretty long list of comps. We would normally do 12 to 14. This obviously exceeds that because we needed to make sure we had enough data. So that was the comparable entities in Pennsylvania. And then the other thing was we went to university towns. What's important about this list was we were looking at Big Ten, and we tried to stay, in Pennsylvania and West. Obviously, we have New York State in there, but we did not go east and into the Northeast because of the cost of living. So we stayed in Pennsylvania and primarily went to the West, North and the West. and looked at some of these university communities because of the service delivery model. So that's what we did in order to gather data from the market. But a couple of things when you do a survey. We had 40 positions out of the 88 in the survey. We obviously could not survey for 88. Nobody would respond. It's hard enough when we ask for data for 40. But we defined the position as the work is performed at COG. And the reason for that is if you go to another jurisdiction, there may or may not be the same job title. So we want to make sure we're getting comparable data. We also review the data very thoroughly to make sure it's relevant. If you look in Appendix C of the report, all of the raw data is there. If you see any highlighting and the word edited, you can see that we disagreed with some of it, but we definitely showed our work. We had a position, and on the next page it has the same position title with the word edited behind it. We removed some data points, and you can see that the impacts of the bottom line. And then we also try to use salary ranges where possible, because it's just a better gauge of the market value of the position. If you have a salary range, it's different than an actual salary. If you only have an actual salary, you don't know the tenure that the employee has been working for an organization, nor do you know the market conditions under which that person was hired. So where we could use salary range data, we did. And then the last point is the data, and this report is from 2022. You need to continue to update those ranges in order to stay competitive with the market. But what you're looking at now is 2022 data, because that's when we gathered it. So in the future, we said hold it for 2023 and start updating it in 2024. And it's very important that you do that, otherwise you'll fall behind the market. And then the other side of the survey was the benefit side. And you can see here we had medical insurance and paid leave. That's very standard, but we wanted to see where you compared to other entities. And then we also looked at some other benefits like alternative work schedules and things of that nature to see are other jurisdictions offering that type of benefit, and if so, who is, what does it look like? Again, it's something for you to think about in the future in order to maintain your competitive advantage against other employers. So the compensation plan is in your report in Table 2, and that's on page 28 of the printed version or 31 of the PDF, depending on which one you're looking at. Table 3 is just the calculations of the pay ranges, and that's on page 32 of the printed version or 35 of the PDF. But we went in, we looked at all of the data from the market, we pulled it into Table 2. Table 3 is just calculations that also tie to Table 2. But we had 14 grades that we put into this plan. And all of the ranges are what we consider to be open range merit, meaning they have a minimum for the range and a maximum for the range. And the way that people move through the range is based on performance. So you can see here, based on the way that it's broken down, you have the first 6 grades are positions that we would consider to be administrative and technical. And then grades 7 through 10 are supervisors and advanced technical positions. Grades 11 through 13 are your agency directors, and then there's a separate grade for the executive director. There's 2 tools that we use in order to calculate the ranges and try and match them to market as best as possible. The first one is called gradation, and the second one is called range spread. The gradation is the difference in starting pay from one grade to the next. So for example, grade 2, the starting pay is 10% higher than grade 1. Grade 3, the starting pay is 10% higher than grade 2. All the way through your plan, we were able to use a 10% gradation. And the range spread is the difference from minimum pay to maximum pay, and all of the grades is 40%. So the maximum pay for each pay range is 40% higher than the minimum pay. So it just worked out that we were able to do that. In other studies, the gradation can change between each one of these bands, these 4 bands that are listed here for COG. For some reason, it was able to be 10%, which is good, because that means that the next grade, the starting pay is 10% higher. So that's a nice difference in starting pay per grade. So on the benefit survey, you can see here, these are all of the different things that we looked at. On the left side of this table are pretty traditional benefits, your medical insurance, your flexible spending and health reimbursement accounts, your paid leave. So that's pretty standard, and when we looked at all of that, you're fairly comparable. In some places you're more generous, in other places you're a little lacking. But we find most times that when we do these surveys, it's very rare that something is there's a real difference. There's always differences, but not something that's overly significant, and that's what we found for you. But on the right side, there's a few different benefits. We all hear about alternative work schedules or remote work. So we wanted to just go through and see, who's doing this. And there are some jurisdictions that are offering these benefits. For several of them, you don't offer them. So it's something to think about for the future. As you're looking at your compensation, as you're looking at your benefits package, what you want to think about in order to attract and retain people. We know it's a very competitive market. We know that you're really in the center of Pennsylvania, so sometimes you have to bring people in, but you're competing for talent within your area, so you really want to attract and retain people. And some of these things, are really low or no cost, like an alternative schedule or remote schedule. So it's just something for you to think about going forward. Going forward, as far as administration is concerned of the system, on the classification side, as I mentioned, you have the tool. If you want to classify a job in the future, you can do that and slide it into the plan, and you'll know the compensation range. So, if you're looking at your compensation plan every year, if you have to change anything, adjust, add, delete, as long as you do that, it will last you for a very long time, as I mentioned. On the compensation side, you really want to think about what the market is doing. So we looked at ranges and set them based on the FY 2022 data. We didn't adjust it for 2023, but for 2024, you really want to go back and ask those comps, or a majority of them, not all of them, because it's a very long list, but maybe the Pennsylvania ones. How are they adjusting their ranges, and consider doing something similar. So if the average is 2% or 3% or 4%, whatever it is, if you adjust your ranges by the same amount and give that general increase to employees, you're going to remain competitive with the market. When jurisdictions don't do that, they fall behind. So that's the way you maintain it going forward. I do want to raise one other point. I know that the staff is going to talk about implementation and the strategies. We've talked about a lot of different strategies. You have some adjustments that need to be made in order to bring some employees up to market. We talked about phasing implementation, and that's a good strategy, especially when you have a high price tag in order to implement it, which in your case it is. So the only thing that I want to mention here is when you consider phasing, which I think is a good option to kind of stabilize those implementation costs, you don't want to have it last too long. If you have employees that are under market right now, within a year or so, you really want to try and get them up to market. So you can always phase, you can do something at implementation, something 6 months later, a year later, but you really want to try and implement within a year, if at all possible. So that's the last point I wanted to raise. But with that, I'll stop sharing my screen. I'm not sure if you have any questions now, or if the staff just wants to go into the implementation piece.
Questions of Ms. Kadamatori?
I had one question.
Yes. Go ahead.
You had mentioned that to move through the salary range, the employee, I'm paraphrasing, this is my understanding, the employee would do that through performance. Does the cost of living adjustments raise a person's salary? Doesn't that also move the person through the salary range?
No, it doesn't. And I always refer to it as a general increase because it's usually not tied to cost of living. Sometimes, as you know, when the cost of living was virtually, 0.1%, people were still getting more than 0.1%, they were getting maybe 2 or 3%. So what we recommend is when you make that general increase, whatever it is, 2%, 3%, 4%, that is, the range moves by that amount. So the minimum pay and the maximum pay are increased by whatever that general increase is.
Wow.
And then the employee's pay also goes up. So then moving through the range is based on merit. So you want to do a general increase, and then you want to have some mechanism to fund some type of merit pool that can be managed, by administration in order for people to get an additional bump, but based on performance. So it's really 2 prongs.
Mr. Marshall?
Yeah, this is a big study. I'm not commenting on the whole study. I just had a couple questions. On page 4, you list for external equity market competitiveness, and you say the full list of chosen comparable organizations is listed below, and in that list, I see Half Moon Township and Harris Township. They're hardly comparable to most of those listed. I don't know what the result of that is, but I don't think they're comparable.
Well, you're correct, and I agree with you, but they're in the center region. So sometimes we have, and in Appendix B in the report, let me just tell you where it is. I'll tell you the exact page in 1 second. Okay. You want to go to page 46 of the printed 49 of the PDF. And you'll see the 2 lists, because remember I mentioned we added some?
Yeah.
Every community has a measure of comparability. There's always comparability. The question is how comparable. So you just mentioned Harris. The comparability, it's in alphabetical order. It scored, and Half Moon scored 5 out of 100, and Harris scored 12. So they're really not comparable, to your point. However, they're in your region, so it made sense to include them because of where you are geographically located. And if you think about the 40 positions that we surveyed for, very few, would be even exist in those communities. So we didn't want to exclude them because they're in the center region. But we did run them through the analysis to show exactly what you're saying, which is it's a very low comparability when you compare it to the state college.
Okay, I understand that. I did not go through this. I just took 2 jobs and looked at it. And I'm looking at page 55, which happens to be the human resource officer. And the list for minimum grade, 54,139, is second lowest in the whole group. And the maximum rate, 73,087, is also the second lowest in the whole group. I'm not sure why that is. It doesn't seem to me, I don't know, I forget how many employees COG has, and I don't know if you evaluate that, but it looks low. Anyway.
I mean, your current pay looks low, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the minimum rate, is that the current minimum rate, maximum rate, actual salary?
Yes, that's for the center region. There's a line for the center region COG, what your current rate is. Yes, that's correct.
So if I'm looking at human services officer on page 55, I look across at minimum, maximum, and actual salary. I'm looking at what it is now, not what you're proposing.
Correct. You'll see on that page, you'll have all the communities that provided us with information.
Right.
All the way down to Manheim. Then you see Center Region COG, which I think is what you just referenced as far as the range. That's your current pay.
Okay.
And then on the bottom, you see all of our calculations when we're looking at percentiles based on the range data we received, which is communities that reported a minimum and a maximum, actually a range. And then we also calculate on actual salary if they reported that as well. So that's what you're seeing at the bottom below where it says Center Region COG.
Okay, the only other comment I would make is really on the next page, is co-director. He evaluated that position with zoning administrator in Ferguson, zoning officer in Lancaster, chief inspector, supervisor of inspections, code compliance manager, neighborhood and development services. I don't think any of those are comparable, quite frankly, to the director of code.
Right, right, so that's why we asked for the salary. And if you recall, we defined the position in the salary survey. So we said, what does the director do at the center region? And those communities said, this is the comparable position for us. So they may or may not have the same title, and they may or may not have all of the exact same duties, but we rely on those human resources professionals to tell us what is your comparable job. So yeah, on the face of it, if you just look at the titles, I would agree with you that it doesn't seem like the same job, but we ask them based on a definition of your role, what is your comparable position? And it varies. I mean, you can see this pay varies, but that's what we received, and that's what we looked at in the analysis.
But the zoning officer is a zoning officer. I'm not going to continue to take time up, but that does not look right to me, quite frankly. That's all. That's the only thing I have.
Mr. Magruder.
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation. Can you hear me? I'm getting
Yes.
feedback. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate this conversation, and again, I'm definitely in support of making sure that we're getting individuals, paid what they deserve and up to market. I wanted to come back to what the presenter had mentioned about, this being an ongoing process, and so on an annual basis, basically, we're trying to make sure that we're keeping up with market. And I think the concerning piece was that in order to, when you have those general salary increases, I know you had referenced the number 2% or something like that. You said then that the floor for the salary bands would sort of like increase by that much, right? And so then we would need to add in then devise some type of plan for merit-based increases. I think the concern that I have, and again, I'm new to this role, and so don't have a lot of prior information history about budgeting processes, particularly with the COG, and so please others chime in if you want. But I know this last go around we had a 5-6% general salary increase or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, including then a merit. So I understand that this is some precarious times we're in with our economy, and things will stabilize a bit. But I sort of wonder about were we to not get into a place where the economy is stable and cost of living isn't increasing exponentially, how sustainable it would be to every year potentially be approving a 5%, 6% general salary increase, and having then those salary bands increase by that much. Then on top of that, having to add in some type of merit-based increase. And so, again, my wondering is just like the sustainability of this model. Myself working for a public institution here locally, I understand that they themselves don't even, stick to that based on that general salary increase based on whatever funding is coming in, from that year. And so, again, just my wonderings as a naive person about this process, but just wondering about the concerns of the sustainability of every year updating based on general salary increasing in those salary bands, and then adding into that merit base. Just wondering how sustainable this is and how many organizations are actually sort of like following this particular plan, which I think is equitable and social justice oriented, And, you know, that money still needs to come from somewhere. So I'm wondering about taxes and stuff too, knowing that in Patton, for example, we have taxes that we try to remain flat. But, you know, if again, we're funding things that are constantly having to be updated every year, wondering, you know, is it sustainable then for us to continue to, you know, keep taxes flat to support this? So I hope that's understandable, and I can clarify if needed, but just wondering that.
I would just say something in general. I can't obviously speak to the specifics of the budget, but generally, you know, the nice thing about having an open range merit plan is that you have flexibility on that merit component. You also have flexibility on the general increase. So you can say, you can take a survey, you can do whatever you want. I mean, you can determine that based on your own budget. A different type of pay plan would be a defined increment plan or a step plan. And when you have a pay plan like that, and say you put 2%, you know, 2% steps or 3% steps based on merit, you have to budget that. So if your general increase is really high, you know, you might go a little bit lower on merit because of the budget, you know, and so you have, this is the most flexible type of plan that you can have to maintain going forward. So that's general. I know that's a general response. I can't speak to the specifics of the budget, but it does give you the maximum flexibility.
Thanks for that clarification, Joel. And yeah, I think moving forward, again, it's, you know, we definitely want to, you know, compensate in the ways that we need to. And again, I think being very intentional about, you know, how we're doing that. So to hear that, again, the general salary as well as the merit, there's flexibility in both. And sometimes one may have to give, you know, over the other, you know, based on, you know, whatever those allocations are from year to year is important, something that we need to take into consideration, and as well as being communicated to staff, I think. And that, again, as someone who, you know, sometimes sees that, you know, merit increases, you know, I'm gonna stop there. I'm talking too much. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Mr. Bernier?
Thanks. Good question for the presenter. By the way, that was I like the way that your presentation was structured, thorough but concise, and appreciate the work supported. Also appreciate the vetting that the HR committee and finance committee did on this. So quick question. This might be an opinion more than anything. I noticed that 12 of the 14 comparables provided short-term disability. 4 of the 14 allowed for sick time carryover, unlimited carryover of sick time. That's probably not a coincidence, and this is where I'm asking. I couldn't tell in the index, but I'm assuming that 2 of the 4, that the 2 that didn't provide short-term disability, they made up 2 of the 4 that allowed for unlimited carryover of sick time. Do you see that a lot when you do these studies, that unlimited sick time carryover is often allowed in lieu of or in place of short-term disability?
Yes, I wouldn't say it's unlimited, you know.
Or some form of carryover.
Yeah, usually there's an amount that you can accumulate to when it's not the disability plan, you know, and when we think about OPEB and we think about potentially showing that liability, you know, moving towards disability plans where you can limit that exposure, it's a slow process for local governments, but it is happening in some cases.
Okay, the typical duration of short-term is 6 months oftentimes. So
right.
If you can carry over 6 months of sick time, that's often seen as a better or a more valuable benefit even than short-term disability in many cases.
Right, I mean, you want to make sure that people can get to the point where the plan will kick in. You know, you don't want to harm anyone if they're sick. I mean, it's the last thing people need to think about is how they're gonna get paid if they really are ill. So there's lots of strategies. You can have those plans in place. Sometimes they're somewhat employee paid, sometimes they're employer paid, and you sometimes have banks or sometimes you can help an employee get to that minimum should something happen to them. So there's lots of different things that you can do, but it is a good strategy to have that because, you know, unfortunately, if something happens to somebody, if they have a plan that's paying their wages, then that salary becomes freed up in order for you to get somebody to do the work, should somebody be out of time, you know, out of work for a period of time. And that really is with short and long-term disability, you know, both of them.
Okay. I only bring that up because COG was one of the two entities that didn't offer short-term. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a good strategy.
Mr. Lord?
Yeah, I'd like to focus for a moment on merit raises. And most of us who have been in a workplace situation are familiar with the slacker 4 desks down that does the bare minimum, and the go-getter who like strives to make the organization better and achieve. And as I looked at the proposal, I was a little confused. The proposal was 0.2%, policy was 1.5%, and I'd like our Finance Committee and Human Resources to focus on how we distribute merit raises, and just across the board, everybody gets 1.5%. Doesn't reward people that work hard. The fact that you're sitting there busting your butt and someone else gets the same merit raise while they're doing the bare minimum, that's not good for the workplace culture. So I hope that our policy going forward would be something more on the line of merit raises would be between 0 and you can pick a number, 0 and 3%, with the overall average being 1.5.
I'm just going to say this might be more appropriate for the last part of the discussion.
Okay.
And implementation.
Well, it might be best to address this now because our current policy is more along the lines of what you're recommending than what you're thinking. So I'd like Becca to address that.
I appreciate that, yeah.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kadamatari.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm Becca Pettit, Human Resources Officer. And Bruce, yes, that is how our COLA is, our merit is now. It's 0 to 2%, with 1.5 being the average. If somebody earns over a 1.5, it pulls from that 1.5 merit pool that we have set aside, 1.5 of gross wages. It takes away from somebody else. And so we do evaluations, and the agency directors present us with performance-based merit increases, and it's not 1.5 across the board.
Okay, well, thank you. I think it's important for the workplace culture. So
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. And also, I would just add to that this is one of our projects right now, but another project that we have on our wish list or things to tackle moving forward. We would like to review our current performance evaluation method and forms and all of the things, like overall of that moving forward. So that will be something in the future that the HR committee will be working with me on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that everything for Ms. Kadamatari's presentation?
Yeah. Unless there are no more questions for her, staff has a presentation on implementation. And as I pull that up, I just wanted to thank everyone, both elected officials and staff, for patience with this process. This has taken longer than I think Joellen expected, but we have been working on this since May of last year. So we thank everyone from the staff perspective who have taken time and have been patient in investing in the work of this, but also Becca, and she's really been lifting the heavy load on this, and I appreciate the work she's done. And she prepared the implementation proposal and plan that we're about to share with you in conjunction with myself and the agency directors and finance staff. So it's been a team effort putting this part of this together in conjunction with with Joellen as well. But we've been working on this. We've shared versions of this with the HR committee, executive committee, finance committee, and as we've been asked additional questions, we've added additional slides. So some of you may not have seen everything that's included in this presentation, but I think Becca's going to take over the first part of this, and then Jennifer will take part of this, and then I'll take part of this. So first up.
Yeah. Good evening again, and I just want to reiterate what Eric said. Thank you for the discussion that you're having here tonight, and we apologize for the repeat performance. I know some of you have sat through this a couple of times now, but the numbers in this presentation, it's important to keep in mind they're estimates. So as staff turns over, the costs have been a moving target. So keeping in mind that they are estimates, and the cost estimates are wages only. They don't account for ERE like a FICA, UC, workers' comp, retirement. But it does not affect what we would be paying for health insurance or dental vision. So the largest figures that you have there that will be on top of the wages would be your FICA and retirement that we will need to calculate in. So the estimates in here will be a little higher based on those things, but for these purposes is wages only. And also something to keep in mind that for the purpose of comparison, we modeled this with a 5% 2024 COLA and 1.5% merit. Obviously, we don't know, what that's going to be yet, but that's what we modeled this after. So a wage study has not been conducted, as we repeatedly are saying, in almost 2 decades. This has contributed to the number of positions that are currently being paid under market. And we feel that number would have been higher if not for a salary study that was conducted in the codes department about 5 years ago, and some salary adjustments were made at that time. So there's only a couple in that department that are under market now, and we feel that had a big impact on this. So a lot of analysis and thought went into the implementation planning. Multiple options and phase scenarios were considered. Eric's going to touch base on those a little bit later in the presentation. And we really feel as staff that we identified the most responsive way in this implementation plan to bring our valued staff as quickly as possible up to market while addressing the fund balance concerns in the insurance reserve. That's been a concern that we've heard about in the past. And in fact, this would keep course with using those monies to do something that is supportive of staff. And this body, or the finance committee, approved the funds that paid for this study actually to come from that insurance reserve when we started this process. And being sensitive to the municipal budgets before the full effect of implementation is felt, just to help offset that burden to their budgets. So this slide depicts the 88 positions that Joellen said, those 88 titles. This covers approximately 98 full-time staff, 18 part-time staff, plus library pages and seasonal staff. These numbers that you're going to see here do include the approximately 15 library pages, but do not include seasonal positions. So the first row that you're looking at there shows all zeros across, and that is that no COG staff are currently being paid over market range. The second row that you see is the within market range. So the number of full-time staff that are being paid at market are 59. That's across 12 classifications. 3 part-time staff are paid at market across 2 classifications for a total of 62 employees that are currently being paid at a competitive rate. The bottom row is 39 full-time staff that are currently being paid below the market range, and that's across 9 classifications, and approximately 30 part-time staff across 4 classifications for a total of 69 employees currently being paid below the market range. So that's at 0%, the chart or the pie graph on the left is showing 0% being paid above market, 53% of our employees being paid below market and 47% being paid within the ranges. And then on the right side, this graph is showing the orange color, 11% of those employees are being paid under market by greater than 10 grand. The yellow color is 20%. That's staff that are being paid approximately between 5,000 and 10,000 under market. The largest portion there is 53% in the green, and those staff are being paid between $1,000 and $5,000 under market. And the burnt orange color there is 16% is folks that are being paid less than $1,000 under market. So our recommendation, obviously, is to accept and implement the results of the study. This slide, we talk about the failure to act may lead to some of these things, and none of them are fun to talk about, but we do think that it's important that everybody recognizes the risks of not implementing or not implementing quickly enough. So low morale, staff who are feeling undervalued already, staff resignations, bad attitudes that can lead to poor performance, difficulty in retaining and motivating our current staff, and difficulty in recruiting with wages that are not competitive. It's difficult in recruiting qualified staff. We're seeing some of this already. There are times that we get applications in for a position, and we are picking folks that have a bright attitude, are willing to learn, and they come to COG and we train them. So we're paying dollars to train and recruit staff, and then sometimes if we can't keep up with the pay to keep them once they are trained, they leave for another position that's higher paying, and we start the process over again. We'd really like to utilize those dollars at recruitment or retaining employees rather than recruiting employees, and recruiting the qualified staff that we need to fill the positions that we have. Another is unionization. That is definitely a risk. One of our municipal partners did a similar study a few years ago, and as a result of not implementing that or implementing that on the first try, that contributed to a union at their organization. Another is pay, wage inequities that Joellen referenced earlier in her presentation, and that ties in with EEOC complaints and litigation. So that's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and where we're lucky that we haven't had anything like that at this point.
So during the early part of the year, this year, finance staff, HR staff, and myself, we looked at a number of scenarios and considered various options and the pros and cons of each. And option A, we looked at doing it all at once, January 1st. We looked at 2 phases, one in this year, one in next year, 2 phases both in 24, and 3 phases, 23, 24, and again in 24, staggered every 6 months. We looked at 4 phases, staggered in 23, 24, and 25. So we tried to look at a number of the options. As Joellen mentioned earlier, it's best not to extend any phasing beyond 1 year. So we looked at the pros and cons. Phasing spreads the cost over time, easing the financial impact. But on the flip side, the cons are greater. They put more, multiple phases puts the financial burden of delayed implementation on those employees who are underpaid, and many of those have been underpaid for many years. It's also based on the manual effort that's required anytime we make changes in an employee's withholding or pay rate or things like that. It can be labor intensive if there's a number of employees that are being modified in the payroll system several times in a year. So the proposal that Becca started to outline has 3 phases. This is a title change in November of 2023 with 4 recommended title changes. There'll also be the market adjustment for the 69 staff effective in early November with the first payroll. So all of those staff would move to the bottom of their new ranges. So they're just getting into the new market rate. The next phase is beginning January 2024. COLA and merit is implemented for all staff, and so that, as Joellen talked about earlier, would help keep the study and the rates determined in the study current and competitive in the market, and then other staff who are not receiving any adjustment in pay due to market adjustment because they're already within the range would still be eligible to receive the COLA and merit, all in accordance with policy, as Becca outlined earlier in response to Mr. Lord's question. Phase 2 would be later on. We would need to look at the wage compression issue that was identified earlier. This is a situation that addresses when we have new hires that are earning about the same as or close to the amount of a tenured employee. And so we want to study and identify those areas and identify strategies for addressing that. And that's an equally important phase, but that will need to be once we get phase 1 with everybody up to market. So this is a visual representation about some of those costs in response to a question we had earlier in a previous presentation. So we're right about 3% of the total payroll budget that this would represent. This on the right is a depiction showing use of insurance reserves as suggested with 50,000 in 23, 100,000 in 24, and 50,000 in 25 to kind of ease the implementation of the recurring costs of the recommendations for phase 1. So I'll turn that back over to, now I think Jennifer's going to pitch in.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Steigelman. I'm the interim finance director. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to review this in more detail. The market adjustments of phase 1 were estimated at implementation on November of 2023 would be approximately $38,900, of which we had budgeted $50,000 that had been previously authorized in last year's budget process to make the market adjustments for the 69 staff that are currently paid below market. January in 2024, we are estimating the cost would be, per this model, $252,850, the full year cost of market adjustments. Staff's proposing to use insurance reserve funds to ease the financial burden for the municipal budgets and to address the insurance reserve fund balance concerns that this organization has discussed in the last few years. For 2024, we're looking at using $100,000 of that fund balance reserve, and for 2025, the staff is recommending $50,000 towards the costs. The goal was to strike the right balance to ensure the integrity of the fund balance that is used for employee wellness initiatives and for health insurance premiums. The 2024 COLA and merit, all eligible employees receive the COLA and merit per the COG policy. Without implementation of the study results, would cost approximately $430,491. With the November 23 implementation of the study results, it would cost approximately $450,000 for that. This slide shows a 2-year action plan to kind of lay out the timeline that we're looking at for implementation, starting with clearly in June, we were looking at the study of the implementation proposal presented to the HR and executive committees, proceeding with July, where the proposals went to the Finance Committee and to the COG General Forum. For November of 23, we were recommending the 69 staff who are paid below market move to the bottom of their newly proposed range, and also 4 title changes would be implemented. In early of 2024, as noted at the bottom of the slide, salary ranges would slide by the COLA consistent with COG existing practice, all eligible employees would receive the annual COLA and merit. In April, we would start discussing the implementation of the Phase 2 piece. December would be the potential implementation of Phase 2, looking at the January of 2025.
So last couple slides here. The study did have other recommendations, which included, obviously, this compensation plan that relates external market as well as internal being internally equitable. Recommends adjusting all employees below the market to the minimum of the range, implementing 5 title changes. I know the previous slides said 4. Technically, it is 5. One is the office manager position, which right now is office manager exempt and non-exempt, and we're proposing to make those just office manager. Adopting the open range merit plan, which is similar to what COG does now and that we discussed a little bit earlier. Consider areas of wage compression and longevity recognition. Adopt a pay philosophy and work towards the 60th percentile. So this study has us at the 50th percentile. A recommendation that came out of this and a goal to work towards is being at the 60th percentile so that we are desirable employer, staying a little bit ahead of the market. Right now, it's enough just to get to the middle of the market, so that's something to work towards later. Future administration of the compensation plan, using the job analysis questionnaire and job factor scoring sheet. That's the tool that we would be able to use moving forward as positions are added or positions change to make sure that we're keeping them in the right classification and the right salary band. Continuing to survey comparable communities annually, increase compensation wages for each pay grade by an average of the comparable communities in every 5 years, ensuring that the comparable communities are still comparable. So just a couple last notes in summary. What we are talking about and what we are asking for here are market adjustments. They've been referred to as raises or bonus, and we just want to be clear that it is not a raise and is not a bonus. It is simply a market adjustment to bring staff up to the level of pay for the work that they're doing. We do have the COLA, the cost of living allowances, and that's calculated right now per COG policy, driven by the CPIU. We have the merit and achievement awards, where employees can earn a merit based on performance. So we've talked about that this evening as well, from 0 to 2% based on performance. Or they can also get a one-time lump sum payment that recognize an accomplishment anytime throughout the year. We also just want to be mindful of the budget priorities. One of the top priorities that was set by COG staff and the executive committee was to take care of COG staff, the staff that we already have. We feel that this plan is responsive to that, to bring staff up as quickly as possible. It also addresses the fund balance concern, eases the burden on municipal budgets over multiple years, maintains adequate insurance reserve balance for the wellness and premium programs that Jennifer had mentioned. And I would just close with that it shows goodwill to our employees, who are our most valuable resource. Open it up for any questions. I think Joellen is still with us on the call if we have any further for her or any that she could help us answer for you.
Questions? I have one that I asked earlier, and I was just wondering if there's anything anecdotal. Have we had, have we noticed issues with turnover in recent or even a longer span of years with COG employees?
Go ahead, Eric.
I think certainly, yes, we have had some staff leave for other positions, private sector, maybe with more flexibility, different compensation, different benefits. So these are certainly things that we've noticed. It hasn't been wholesale in terms of folks leaving in that way, but we found it probably more difficult in terms of the attraction, getting people who find it something where they can afford to live or financially able to move here. I think we have a very attractive location, and we've had people coming in for interviews and really excited about the opportunity, and then there's been one reason or another, financially or otherwise, that they've turned down an offer or withdrew from the consideration. We've also had, particularly in recent years, had to make market adjustments for lifeguards and some of our other park maintenance employees and such, so that we could compete with the very local markets that we have for those kind of positions. So it's something we've been really working at steadily since before I got here. The lifeguard adjustments were started before I arrived, but it's been a continuing effort, and one made more challenging by the pandemic and the Great Resignation and other sorts of things, as well as other economic issues. So these are all things that we identified last year when we brought this to the, first to get it into the budget, then to the HR committee, and then recommended to the general foreman. It was unanimously approved to do the study in April last year. So as I said earlier, this has been a long time in process, and so we appreciate the commitment and support of the general foreman and all of the positive comments we've heard. Now I think it's on all of us to work together to find a way to implement this and support the staff that support the municipalities of the region.
I would add to that too, that we've had trouble, especially with the key positions, the agency director level positions, because our salaries, our current salary ranges are not competitive. In order to find the talent that we need to fill those positions, in some cases we're finding that we have to hire in over the base, current base salary range, and what that does is bumps up against tenured employees that are here. So in order to help that and to help not have pay inequities internally, it would be really helpful to implement new ranges for those positions.
Questions? Mr. Marshall. Peter, go ahead. Unmute.
I think what you're doing is absolutely necessary. The fact that it hasn't been done in that long a period is amazing. And the implementation program that you're suggesting makes sense to me. The municipalities have to realize it's going to cost more, and they'll see that. But I don't know how you avoid doing what you're proposing to do. I support it.
Thank you, Peter.
Any other comments? Mr. Cervello?
Well, I have a number of issues with the program, with the plan. I don't know that I can cover them all. One of the things, I've stated it before, is I believe there's an issue with the market. I think that's a key issue. I think the market that was considered, and we keep talking about market in this presentation, and we compare our current positions and the new salary ranges, and all these things are relative to this market. That is an arbitrary market created by, it's a model created by a consultant. And then all of the positions we currently have, their salaries and everything are being compared to this market. And, you know, it's found wanting, let's say, for lack of a better term. That, to me, is an arbitrary measure. One of the things I noticed in the presentation, we talked about, merit was talked about extensively. COLA was not discussed at all, and I believe the current COLA percentage is at 6.3%. That will be the COLA applied in 2024. We talk about a 1.5% merit, a merit pool. Some people could get more, some people could get less. I get that. I understand this stuff. We're talking about, that's the only thing that bumps a person up within a salary range. But the COLA moves the entire salary range. So you've got a COLA that's 4 times the average merit. That would move the salary range faster, or the classification range, let's call it, faster than the merit. So I know that that COLA is going to drive the merit in order to keep people from falling behind this arbitrary salary range. So that's a key. I think that's a key issue with regard to this whole thing. I don't believe people and nothing's discussed relative. This isn't discussed in the context of the program plan, which in itself is a large plan in terms of positions, in terms of increasing positions within the COG. I heard discussion about the broad range of services provided. Well, perhaps we need to look at those services provided. Maybe COG takes on more than it needs to take on. When it comes to position justifications and that relate to this program, I don't see any plans for rebalancing staff to meet the current needs, because an organization needs to be flexible to meet the needs. But this whole plan was developed in conjunction with a consultant by staff, for staff. I don't see input from the people who are paying the bill for this, and I believe that the employees fully understand this plan. That's my understanding. I've been led, or at least I understand, that the staff know what's coming. They know what the expectations have already been set before we even get to decide on an approval of a plan, let alone the implementation of that plan. So I got lots of problems with this, the whole approach. I wasn't on the executive committee or one of those committees last year. I wasn't privy to a lot of this information last year. And there's a lot. This is voluminous. This plan is voluminous. It's a lot to take in. But I've seen these kinds of plans before. Penn State often uses this type of planning. But I'm not sure everybody understands the actual cost of this plan. It's incredible to me that we would this can't be taken lightly, and it's to me, it's overplay. But that's my opinion. That's what I wanted to say.
Other comments? Well, I only want to say that I pretty much agree with what Mr. Marshall said. But are there any other comments from the general forum? That said, there's a motion there. Betsy, yeah, sorry, Betsy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just would like to second your comments and Mr. Marshall's comments. I would also like to thank the staff for that. And I'd also like to add that as far as input from people paying the bill, I think that's us. It's certainly me, it's certainly my constituents. And I believe that I'm voting in their set of values. So they can certainly vote me out of office, but I know a lot of my constituents pretty well. I would just like to add that. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
I would further add, as for those paying the bill, our residents want to be able to have staff available to answer any questions and concerns that they have when they need them. As elected officials, we only have so much time in the day, but we do rely on our staff to fulfill a lot of the services that our constituents see day in, day out, whether that's going to parks or finding people that are there to pick up their recycling for them, we want to make sure we take care of the people that are providing the service to our residents that are relying on the service. Thank you.
Other comments? There is a motion which, Dan, sorry, Mr. Trevino. I'm in too much of a hurry tonight. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just remind the general quorum, I'm the Patton Township representative to the COG Finance Committee. Our committee, when you look at our report and your agenda, we certainly spend a lot of time discussing this this plan and potential implementation issues. Certainly, several of us have real concerns about the price tag for the implementation plan recommended by the COG staff. We are having on our agenda August 10th, the next COG Finance Committee. We are continuing to discuss this and the possible implementation plans. I believe every municipality had a presentation on the plan, and we did at Patton anyway. And so we, the Board of Supervisors, individually gave quite a few comments to Eric on various concerns that we had and suggestions to adjust their proposed implementation plan. So we're certainly going to have a very robust discussion in the Finance Committee on August 10th. And I would just encourage any other municipal elected officials who are not currently on the Finance Committee, you certainly are welcome to weigh in during our committee meeting on these issues and offer your critiques and your suggestions. So I look forward to that particular discussion next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trevino. Mr. Harmon.
Yeah, I've been debating whether to say anything here or not, but I did talk a little bit in the executive committee, but I always have a problem with blanket anything. You know, when you're just going to give out here, we're going to move everybody to here or move everybody. You know, we pay staff members to be managers, and I think that's what we need. You know, as a group, we shouldn't be saying we're going to give this person this much and this person this much. We should be saying, here's how much we're going to give you to run your organization, and let the management of the staff do it. I mean, we're sitting here right now with this, and what we're proposing here is for us to be the managers. You know, and if that's the case, well, then we might as well take over a COG and save ourselves a lot of money. We need to say, this is what we're budgeting, then staff needs to work within that. We have pressures out there, and this is not one of them. And I will tell you, the lifeguard situation will get worse. It's going to have to go up. In this study, nothing's going to change that. It's every year you're going to be fighting to get certain positions, whether they're lifeguards or whatever. That market is just moving up year after year after year, and no matter what we pass here, we're always going to be coming back to revisit it with the way we're doing it. We need to say, here's what we got, here's what you have. I think this needs discussed at the Finance Committee and the HR Committee, and needs to be hashed out before we come up with anything that we're going to agree with. And the motion that's on the table here tonight basically says that. Let's have some more discussions on it before it comes to this group and gets finalized. I just, you know, I was never given a blanket anything. It was like, here's how much money you've got next year to pay your bill, and that's what I had to deal with. And that's the job. That's where you have to roll your sleeves up and make things happen. I haven't heard anything about, well, we have 69 people that are under the market, but how many of them are performing to the market? I haven't heard anything about that. How many of the people that are getting paid over are performing under the market? I haven't heard anything about that. Let's just move them all up. I think there needs to be more discussion on this, and that's kind of where I'm thinking. I'm not ready to vote for it in any way until I see what I feel is a really good, robust discussion that hashes this all out. And I'm not saying it's not needed. We need to pay our people, but we need to make sure that we're getting our bang for the buck also.
Mr. Piper.
I agree with Mr. Harden. I also feel like I've just sat through a timeshare sales program. I mean, there are probably people at this COG that are way underpaid. I know there's some very good employees here, and I'm sure there's some employees that need to go. But I think those evaluations need to be done. I think there's some elements of this proposed program that are just out of hand. Chapel Hill, North Carolina is a very different world than State College, Pennsylvania, if anybody's been down there and spent much time. So I am not prepared to move any of this stuff forward until it's been properly discussed and evaluated by members of the committees.
We do staff performances every year. So that's a kind of a different issue, and that's where we come up with our merits. But just to be clear, that's an annual task.
Ms. Robb.
First of all, let me say thank you to the staff. You guys are extraordinary. To deal with each and every one of these municipalities with all of our attitudes and our just working with us as municipalities, each and every one of us. So to let the staff know, I'm speaking for myself, and I can say for Patty, we appreciate what you do. My question is to Eric. As we all did our program and you did an outstanding presentation, and we answered certain questions and we had certain concerns and comments, have that been taken into consideration between the time limit? I know we did ours on Wednesday. We had to have it in by Friday. Have the staff and yourself had an opportunity to review our concerns and moving forward on this?
So the feedback and comment guides from each of the municipalities is in the packet tonight. Staff agency directors and I have already started looking at them and starting to prepare responses, but it's only been a couple of days, as you noted. Our plan is to have staff responses and comments ready so that when the Finance Committee meets, we are addressing all of those concerns and answering any remaining questions for the Finance Committee to see, because that will be part of the information that needs to be taken into consideration both by staff in developing the detailed budget, as well as when the Finance Committee reviews the detailed budget proposals and anything that's not funded that may want to be funded.
And to my colleague, Supervisor Torino, and being the representative for Patton Finance, will this throw it off if we hold off our decision tonight and wait for us to review the Finance Committee recommendations and their concerns in moving this forward? Not to hold up, because I think each and every person that works for COG deserves a raise. In 17 years, if you weren't here on the board, sorry. They earned that. They earned sticking with us. You talk about wages. People have families. And whether people take in consideration that these staff members have families to take care of. And we're holding in the balance their lives. We appreciate what you do. And please, make sure you tell the staff that I've dealt with here, Scott, Tammy, Shirley, some of us have been on several committees. We appreciate what you do to keep us moving forward, keeping the operation moving forward. And if we can't see that as this committee, shame on you. Shame on you. They may be individuals that excel in their job and some that may need help in their job. But they're still giving 100%, trying to keep things moving for COG and representing us. When they say COG, it's all our municipalities that are being represented. So to the staff, and I hope you hear me, I hope you truly hear me. We appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Haymeister.
With that activity, I would like to move the motion. I'd like to read that motion. That the general forum receive the 22-23 classification and compensation study and draft implementation plan, and request that the Finance Committee continue to work with staff to develop an implementation plan to be considered by the general forum.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes. University report, is there anyone here? No, there is no one, no university report. SCASD report, is there anyone from SCASD here? No. Whitehall Road Regional Park Project Coordination Team Report. Now I know Mr. Frank is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Short report. All but concrete work, landscaping, and fencing are over 90% complete on the project. Since the last general forum, the final connection of the site sewer has been made. There's flushing toilets. The concrete floor has been poured and rough electric installed in the maintenance building. The safety surface that surrounds the playground structures has been installed. The recent rain has greatly helped the landscaping, tree planting, and field stabilization. Pavement of the driveway is tentatively scheduled for the week of August 14th, and project closeout will occur thereafter with a soft opening of the non-field assets in the fall. In the memorandum of record with tonight's agenda are the 7/14/23 project summary, Table 1 and Table 4, as reviewed by the authority at and after their July 20th meeting. One item of note, thanks to the efforts of the Parks Project and Finance teams, the authority was awarded an additional $33,000 towards the lighting grant from the Pennsylvania DCNR. Congratulations to the team, and a huge thank you to DCNR for once again being such a valuable partner to Parkland in the Center region. As a result, you will note that the contingency fund balance actually went up slightly from last month, which is a good problem. Pending any questions, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for Mr. Frank? Seeing none, on Executive Director's report, Mr. Norenberg.
Good evening. Several of the things I would mention have already been mentioned, but just wanted to draw your attention to the agency director reports and the activity report that's prepared in your packet tonight. There's a lot that's been going on the past month. I'd be happy to answer any questions on those items or any of the matters of record when we get to those later on. But otherwise, I'll defer to other things ahead.
Okay. Agency director reports. Looks like the first one's from Mr. May.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim May. I'm the director of the Center Regional Planning Agency. Tonight, I wanted to update you on a couple of activities that we do in my agency. The first is a 5-year update to the Regional Development Capacity Report, or the REDCap report. That's a document that we prepare every 5 years to estimate the development capacity inside the Growth Boundary Source Service area.
The fact that we have farmland and open space outside our area doesn't just happen by accident. It's happened because we've had this boundary for many years. But just so you know, there are over 3,000 acres of vacant land inside the growth boundary source service area. That's just over 5 square miles. Since 2012, about 17% of the land area, the vacant land area that we had been developed. The residential capacity, based on current growth, would be over 10,000 equivalent dwelling units using the UAJ measure for capacity in the region to grow by a few hundred units at the most annually, so there's a lot of capacity left. Non-residential capacity can support over 18 million square feet of non-residential space, which is an incredible amount of inventory. We also want to point out that inside the growth boundary source service area in the past 5 years, we've added about 1,100 dwelling units and about 390,000 square feet of non-residential space. If this were to be developed outside the growth boundary, we'd estimate that would take about 500 acres of vacant land that's outside the growth boundary to accommodate that. But we were able to put that inside the growth boundary, use a lot of our existing infrastructure to serve that development. The other side of this report deals with SOAR capacity at the UAJA. We currently have about over 9 million gallons of capacity built into the plant on a daily basis, and we're using about 5.3 million gallons a day. So about half the capacity of the plant is being utilized to date. And again, the bottom line is we want to measure how much capacity is inside the growth boundary source service area to make sure that we have enough land to support development. Based on current population forecasts, we do have enough land area to serve residential development for about 40 years. And non-residential capacity is well beyond that based on our current forecast. So there's plenty of capacity inside the growth boundary service area. I know some of you will be probably receiving a request to expand that boundary, but I just want to make sure that everyone understood that that system is working the way that we wanted it to work. We're preserving open space outside the area. We're using existing infrastructure inside, and so it's working well for us. The second thing I wanted to update you on very quickly is that we need to start an update to our comprehensive plan. Every 10 years, the state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, wants us to look at the comprehensive plan and update sections that are out of date. So this fall, we anticipate sending out a survey to begin to collect information from residents on what they feel is important for future growth in the center region. So that'll be upcoming soon. The last thing I want to do is ask Pam Adams to come forward and share some of her good news about her trip to Kuala Lumpur.
Hello, my name's Pam Adams. I'm the Sustainability Planner here at the Center Region Planning Agency, and I've got 6 slides. It's not going to be a lot, but I just want to share with you real quick an opportunity that I had to share some of the experiences that we are doing here and be recognized by the Department of State. So on the next slide, I've got some information on Malaysia. I am not going to go through that since I'm sure everybody is nearing their end of time, but I spent most of my time over there in Kuala Lumpur, and it was a very interesting trip. And the main reason, if you remember on the next slide, it shows that in June of 2022, COG hosted 2 fellows. It was Tess from Vietnam and Chui from Malaysia. And part of that program, we call it YSEALI. The acronym is for Young Southeast Asia Leaders Initiative Professional Fellows Program. And that's a U.S. Department of State program trying to exchange leaders from Southeast Asia. They come and they spent a month with us and learned about some of the things that we're doing here and working a lot collaboratively with Penn State. And Chui's proposal that we worked on got selected by the State Department. There's about 20% that get selected for an exchange. And so I went over in May and spent 2 weeks in Kuala Lumpur, of which the main project was this symposium, which was a day-long symposium where we worked on a workshop and a dialogue on community mediation. How do you have conversations with community members on complicated subjects such as climate change, and doing that with the university? Sort of what I did, if you recall, in 2021, we had a public forum during COVID, and with Laura Fowler's class at Penn State. So on the next slide, you'll see some pictures from the event. The European Union was represented there, and then that's a Facebook post. So this was a very well appreciated, great experience for me. Lots of different universities came. This was hosted by the International Islamic University of Malaysia. They have a new program, their Climate Change Policy and Law Center. So lots of discussion. I'm obviously not a lawyer, but the idea of what I've been experiencing and working with universities to be able to have these conversations with community members was the main focus for that day. Next, I also, while I was there, met with other universities and got to talk about their sustainability programs, what they're doing, and how we work a lot with our university to help engage the community. Lots of great collaboration, and I've since been talking to some university employees and centers to see if we can continue having exchange programs, or maybe setting up some exchange programs and conversations. So it was really nice to be recognized for the work that we're doing and be able to share that information with people on the other side of the world. The next slide, I did get to walk around. Chewy, the fellow, was a great host, took me lots of places. I got to experience the Chinese temples, the mosque. The whole environment is very laid back. They speak English very well. Not everybody wants to, but it's definitely better than my Malay. And they have motorcycles that are all over the roads, but they don't honk their horns. It's a very relaxed and friendly place. So if you're ever thinking of going to Southeast Asia, I'd recommend Malaysia. And then my next slide is just some of the infrastructure. It's definitely car-centric. Lots of, it has trains and metros and bridges and cars that you can sort of see at the top. But it's also very hot and humid. And one of my favorite parts was all of the little bridges and the covered walkways so that you can stay out of the sun. So that's just a little bit about Malaysia, and I think that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Authority, board, and committee reports. First is Executive Committee, Mr. Cervello.
I have nothing to add to what's in the agenda.
Finance Committee, Mr. Trevino.
Yeah, the summary of the Finance Committee is included in your agenda, quite an extensive summary. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay. Whole lot of committees that did not meet. Next is Climate Action and Sustainability Committee, Ms. Whitman.
Thank you very much for the Reddit that's in the agenda. I would like to enthusiastically welcome Jeremy Thompson. I know he's listed in there as being the new vice chair on the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee, but I just want to sing a little praises because I really do like this committee. We've got some great people on it. Jeremy's got a growing knowledge of climate and need for action, and he always comes prepared. And I'd like to say that he's also personally participating in the recycling program that we're trying out, the food scrap and drop-off pilot, which is on my to-do list, but I haven't quite made it here yet. And I'd also like to mention that Jeremy took the initiative of calling in to the radio station WRSC 95.3, which is Tor Michael's talk show in the morning, and I guess he must have asked a question or brought up a solar power purchase agreement. And
And that led Tor Michaels to reach out to Ann Adams and Peter Buck to call up and speak on the program. So I was able to get up at 7:30 in the morning and listen to this. So it all came about from Jeremy's reaching out, and then I'd like to thank Ann and Peter for the excellent job they did in communicating really this project outside of the Center region. So it reaches much of Center County, it's not in the center.
As a matter of fact, the discussion is carried on into this week. The listener pool question this week is, do you support the solar power purchasing agreement? So a lot of people are calling in, voicing what's on their mind about that, and just collaborating. So
We have been going. Yeah, take it out of line. Thank you so much. That's it.
Okay, the remaining committees, any questions about that report? The remaining committees did not meet, so the other business, there are a whole bunch of matters of record. Are there any, Mr. Norberg, we should pay special attention to?
Just note of item F, we are at the staff level, we are starting to look at an update to the COG purchasing policy. And so we've asked the finance committee to take a look and be ready to talk about that next month. And so continuing to improve things and keep our policies up to date. With that, I'll be happy to answer any other questions if there are any other matters of record.
Questions about that? Okay, there is item number 18. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.